I'm going to cover the differences in training women in the sport of Olympic weightlifting, and we're going to start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you want to be more explosive, you want to get stronger, you want to become a freak of nature, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So shout out to Angela Scarpellis for giving us this idea of diving deep into the topic behind women in Olympic weightlifting and women in weightlifting in general, and what goes into the differences between comparing a woman and the training that a woman should go through and what men tend to go through. And so oftentimes in the world of sports performance, in the strength training world, in the world of Olympic weightlifting, we view women as simply little men walking around on the planet, and they can do the exact same style of training that men can do. But there's a couple key factors that we've got to acknowledge right off the bat as coaches. We've got to recognize that women are going through constant changes on a week-to-week basis because they go through menstruation. So the female body is constantly changing. The male body is not changing nearly as much. Men typically can wake up, their testosterone levels are going to be about the same each morning, their estrogen levels are going to be about the same each morning, their cortisol is going to be about the same every single morning, dependent upon if they went out binge drinking or not, but everything else is going to be about the exact same. Whereas women are going through constant changes because of the reproductive cycle. Women are the most important factor behind the proliferation of the human race. So their body is more advanced. They're dealing with constant changes. And as male strength coaches, we've got to recognize these factors. We've got to understand the differences between the two genders and recognize that, hey, there's a lot that can change between training a male and training a female. And that's where we're going to dive into the 4 big key factors that go into developing strong female Olympic weightlifters. So starting off, women are more resistant to fatigue. Why is that? Most men, when they're training, they have lower levels of type 1 muscle fibers, or they have smaller type 1 muscle fibers. Women tend to have a little bit greater and larger type 1 muscle fibers. So they can handle stress, they can handle metabolic stress a little bit more effectively than men can. And that means that they're more resistant to fatigue. So in the realm of Olympic weightlifting and in the realm of strength training in general, that means that women can take a little bit less rest periods. They can do a little bit less rest when they're dealing with waves. They can do more technical work. They can handle changing weights over and over again. And if we're talking about waves specifically, they could do a triple in the snatch and rest a minute, and then do a double and then rest a minute and 10 seconds, and then do a single and rest a minute and 30 seconds, and repeat that much more effectively than men will. Men will need about 1.5 to 2 minutes after a triple because they don't have as large type 1 fibers, and that's one of the key factors behind the reason why women are more resistant to fatigue. That next key factor between the difference between men and women is the fact that women have an abundance of estrogen. Estrogen is this powerful hormone that's sort of been frowned upon, especially because over the years in the world of sports performance, when men take anabolic steroids, when men take testosterone, there'll be a rise in their estrogen levels. And for a while, the medical community was informing everybody that estrogen was horrible for men. And so every male thought estrogen's terrible. And now, years later, we realize that estrogen is anti-catabolic. Estrogen is actually really important to developing lean muscle mass, and it's extremely important for preventing protein breakdown. And that's one of the big factors here with women, is that women can handle a little bit more volume because they have higher levels of estrogen. And because they have higher levels of estrogen, their muscle repair is a little bit more effective. And on top of that, it prevents that protein breakdown while they're in the midst of training. So they can handle a little bit more volume than the typical male will because of the protective mechanisms that estrogen provides. That second key aspect here is that women respond very, very well to slower tempos. The motor cortex that we have inside of our brain in men is a little bit more effective. So men can respond very well to higher intensity levels. We can respond very well to more explosive work. Women respond very well to explosive work, but they also respond very, very well to slower tempos. And we've got to remember, they've got higher levels of estrogen, which means that they can handle that muscle protein breakdown a little bit more effectively, and in turn they're a little bit more resistant to fatigue. And because they're more resistant to fatigue, that brings us to that ability to handle slower tempos a little bit more effectively. So what does that mean? In the realm of Olympic weightlifting, they're going to respond well to slower eccentrics on different squats. They're going to respond well to pauses in squats. They're going to respond well to slower eccentrics if we're talking about a hang snatch or a high hang snatch or a low hang snatch, whatever that might be, to a positional work where we're talking about a pause at the knee, whatever that might be. Women respond very, very well to pauses, to slow eccentrics, and ultimately that leads to them having better movement. So when we see that they respond better to slower tempos, it actually, in my mind, means that that's why women have better technique than men, is because they learn those positions more effectively. They can handle that volume to improve their technique. They are more resistant to fatigue, and ultimately that's going to develop them more efficiently as Olympic weightlifters. So before we get into that number one key factor, recognize that we use all of this information when we're designing our custom Olympic weightlifting program specifically for men and for women. So if you head over to garagestrength.com, you can click on the link down below and you can pick up a custom base Olympic weightlifting program today. So that final key factor is that women recover better from session to session. So one of the best throws coaches in the world, who is also a sports scientist, Dr. Larry Judge, has done research on this aspect, and he's published a study where he's found that women respond much more effectively from session to session than men do. So what does that mean? That means that women could handle doing doubles in a single day. They could even handle potentially doing 3 workouts in one day if they're training specifically to become an Olympian in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. In the normal world, if you take a woman and they want to work out 5 or 6 days a week, they're going to be able to handle that volume much more effectively based off of the works of Dr. Larry Judge. So we can start to see that women recover better from day 1 to day 2, and then from day 2 to day 3, the stress and the fatigue does not accumulate as high as it would when we're programming for men. But it's important to recognize when we're doing this with women that we've also got to factor in their individual menstruation cycle and recognize the impact that the cycle has on each specific female. So what does this mean? If we can look over this, we know that women are more resistant to fatigue. We know that that estrogen helps prevent protein breakdown, and they can actually recover better from session to session, and ultimately that they respond very, very well to slower tempos. So from a coach's perspective, we should be developing the best technique with our women. Our women are going to be able to respond the best to technical work. They're going to be able to respond the best to higher levels of volume. And I even believe that's why it's more enjoyable to train women, because they tend to be more receptive to ideas. They're a little bit less aggressive than their idiot male counterparts. And in turn, they're more open to improving their technique on a regular basis, because they understand that their body responds much better to those slower tempos, to the position work, to the slow eccentrics. And that's ultimately why women are more efficient as Olympic weightlifters. So if you like this information and you want more information about women's training, you can click on this video right here. Until next time, guys, peace.